So happy Thursday. One of the things that I've been meditating on and contemplating throughout this time of quarantine is, to me, I see a lot of parallels between what the people of Israel went through whenever God took them into exile, and the chaos that a lot of us feel as we have seen all of our norms kind of turned upside down. And one of the conversations that we had that I think is particularly relevant is this kind of came through a Facebook interaction I had with one of our church members, and then a conversation around that. But there's just this. It's an observational truth, and I can't point to any biblical text offhand, but it seems to follow logically throughout the biblical text, and that is that all the pain that we experience in life, it's either transferred or it's transformed, and so we have this option, we have this choice of what we do with our pain. And as we contemplate the people of God when they went into exile, they had an amazing amount of pain. They saw, anytime there's change in our lives, one of the grief theories that I think has some truth to it is that anytime there's change to our lives, we have some grief that we have to work through. In fact, even sometimes when something good happens, we have to grieve that things are not as they were. And unfortunately, a lot of times what happens with grief is that we feel lost in our grief, and so we want to redirect it. We want to get it out of us, and we want it to just go away. And it's a deep discomfort with things not being normal for us anymore. And this was true for the exiles as they went off into Babylon. They transferred their grief in any number of ways. They raged against Babylon. They raged against the prophets who told them, hey, we're just going to be in exile for a while. They raged against the kings who they thought had failed them. They did all these things. And what I think is always fascinating about the way that we, I think, idolize control is that all that rage didn't really change the reality of the world. They were still in exile, and the kings were still doing what they did, whether they agreed with that or not. And the prophets were still trying to speak the truth, whether they appreciated the truth or not. So all this transference of pain, it didn't make the world right again in the exiles' eyes. It didn't make them suddenly, and in fact, whenever we try to transfer pain, it doesn't even ease the pain. It just gives us something to do a lot of times. And in fact, I think about the times in my life where I've transferred pain, and nearly without fail, I regret doing that. I then have to grieve the grief I've caused others, and so it's no different when our world turns upside down suddenly. And so I think a lot about this, and I think unfortunately what happens, Robin and I have talked through this, and we're always talking through this, but what happens specifically in the current situation is whoever happens to be within the same four walls as you ends up as a recipient of whatever pain you feel like transferring to them. And so sometimes this can be particularly hurtful for the people you interact with the most. And but I have good news, and that's that there's another way. There's a better way to live, and that is to seek God whenever we're feeling off, to embrace Him, to you know who is a great person to transfer our pain to is the God that loves us. And the reason is that He invites that. He invites us to shove our pain onto Him, to push it towards Him, to allow Him to comfort and to absorb. And so I think about the fact that sometimes the people that we we love the most are the people who end up being the ones who take the worst of us, and it's sad and it's unfortunate. And so as I was thinking about exiles, I think it was probably the same when the people of Israel were carried off and when they went to live in Babylon for a while. The households would have seen an increase in tension. And I again go back to Jeremiah's encouragement to them. Hey, seek the prosperity of the city. Give your sons and daughters in marriage. And the implication there is that your families will stay whole and that your families will love one another well. And so as I process, as I'm, there's always this temptation to process things before they're really finished. We're not really finished with our exile, and we wish we were. But wishing or raging or being frustrated, none of those change the reality of the world we're living in, and the world we're living in has changed. Whether you believe it should be or not, that's kind of irrelevant. There's been change that's happened. And so what do we do with that? Well, I think one of the big things we have to do is we have to speak it, and we have to acknowledge it, and we have to stop denying that there have been changes. Now, does that mean that things won't bounce back, or that things won't get back to some level of normal in the near or the far future? No, of course not. But there's also the possibility that we're looking at long-term changes, and some things may not ever feel normal again. Some things may not ever return to 2019 or before. So what we can do is we can either handle that in an unhealthy way, or we can handle it in a healthy way. And so if we want, we can deny the reality of the situation. If we want, we can take out anger and frustration and rage on people that didn't cause any of this. Ultimately, we all know there's no human being that could have caused or stopped this whole thing. And so all of our frustration, all of our rage, it's not going to change the world we're in. But God may be calling us, God may be opening a door for us to allow that world to change us, and to internalize what we see. So I have been deeply impressed with this thought of how much in my life is not necessary in what I considered my normal life. How much activity, how much doing. Maybe God's calling us to take it a little easier. Maybe God's calling us to slow down more regularly. I don't know. I do know that entering a relationship with God allows us to feel comfortable in not always knowing. I don't have to know right now. I really don't. I can allow myself to ask God, to wrestle with God, to struggle with God. Do I know when this is going to be over? No, I don't. I bet you don't either. unless you're watching this in 2024, in which case I hope you do. But there's this temptation. We worship certainty in the 21st century. We think certainty is what really matters, but I want to tell you, one of the benefits to our current exile is that God has taken away our desire. Well, he's not taken our desire, but he's taken away our certainty in certainty. So maybe one of the blessings is that we can realize that we don't need certainty to live. We have God. And so sometimes having God means we don't have to have certainty all the time. So what does that mean? Well, it means that there's a pain that comes along with a lack of certainty. If we've grown accustomed to always feeling certain, so we think to ourselves, hey, I'll go to such and such. I'm going to go to France next month. And we don't ever really question whether that's going to happen. But I'm always struck by a challenge that Paul makes. He says, don't say you're going to go somewhere. Say, if the Lord wills it, you're going to go somewhere. Maybe that passage takes on a new light for us now. maybe we can understand that in a better way than we could before, because we don't have certainty, and it's become very obvious how little control we have. Maybe those are blessings. Maybe that helps us to realize God is the one that we trust, not our own selves and not our certainty. And so if I could kind of wrap all that together, my encouragement, my hope for you is that part of your transformation in this time is to let go of those things that are unnecessary. Let go of those things that we've told ourselves for years we really need. Things like certainty, things like the ability to plan beyond a shadow of a doubt what's going to happen next month. Maybe this is a chance for us to let go of those things. Maybe the thought that I can completely control my world is something we let go of. It's God's world. It's His job. And that gives a lot of freedom, I think, to live and to love and to embrace the people around me, because I don't have to change everything. So I think I rambled a little bit today. I don't know. But hey, I am sure of one thing, and that is that God is good, and that His goodness will carry us through. And so wherever you are, whenever you experience pain, I encourage you to take a pause and to think to yourself, what do I want to do with this pain? Do I want to give it back to somebody that loves me? Or do I want to allow the God who loves me to use this pain to change me? Be good out there.